Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that you're all here. This is a little bit about me. I started with Fairhaven way back in 2015 as an undergrad at Purdue University of Northwest Indiana. I did graduate in 2016 with my bachelor's in human development and family studies. And I've been doing this work here at Fairhaven since 2015. I started off as a volunteer, volunteering every other Sunday for about a year. And then they brought me on full time in August of 2016, where I've kind of dip my toe in all different facets here at Fairhaven, except for anything to do with financials. You don't want me in numbers. I've worked my way up here to director, and I am now the director of, she just changed my title. I think it's community programs. I oversee our 24-hour rape response team and all non-residential clients that come in through Fairhaven. I am certified for crisis intervention through the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. Crisis intervention is really my bread and butter. And what I super enjoy doing. So that's what a lot of my presentation is going to be on today. And shameless plug, I did win ICASA's Social Services Award in 2022 for my work with anti-trafficking here in the state of Indiana. And also I am a proud survivor leader. So I will be coming at this not only as a director of this program and somebody who has served survivors for the last 10 years of my life, but also as somebody who is a survivor, thriver, and overcomer of domestic violence and sexual violence. So I'm really proud to have that title as well. The objectives of this training is to discuss the myths and realities of what the role of a victim advocate is. If you understand the myths of why some people and what some people may think about us, you're able to help meet that myth and educate so that people can understand what the reality is of that we actually do more than just hold someone's hand. We are going to explain and go over the basic tenets of advocacy and what it means to be a victim advocate. I'll introduce you to the code of ethics that are put forth by NOVA, which is the National Organization for Victim Advocacy. We're going to really hit on the SAFE-R model, which is the model that we use here at Fairhaven for crisis intervention in hospital and bedside advocacy and for forensic exams. And we're going to also touch on a little bit of all the different types of advocacy that we do here in the state of Indiana. So to jump in, I really like to start off with a big positive. So if you are not familiar with the work of Dr. Rebecca Campbell, I am sure that you guys will get extra familiar with her over the course of the next 40 hours. Dr. Rebecca Campbell was really a pioneer for researching and discussing the neurobiology of trauma as it relates to sexual violence. And she did a study back in 2006 called The Rape Survivor's Experience with Legal and Medical Systems. And through that study that she found that survivors of sexual violence that had a sexual assault victim advocate with them were 59% more likely to have their police reports taken than survivors without an advocate whose reports were only taken 41% of the time. She also found that 24% of survivors with advocates were more likely to have their cases further investigated, and that victims of sexual violence with advocates were 86% more likely to receive information on prophylactic medications and treatments for STIs, HIV, and all of the other additional community resources that they had. So as you can see, even though this study took place way back in 2006, and I'm sure those numbers are higher now, there is a significant positive impact on survivors who have a victim advocate present with them from the beginning. And that's what we're going to kind of chat about today. But first and foremost, we have to kind of talk about what an advocate is. If you understand what an advocate is, then you're able to understand what we are not, and that will help you put forth those boundaries moving forward. First and foremost, we respect confidentiality. And we'll get into confidentiality in a couple of slides, but it's really important that all of the communication that you have with a victim happens in a private space without anybody else present so that they can have that moment to share with somebody who has the privileged communication what their experience has been like. We believe in validate experiences. The number one goal of an advocate that we will go over is to listen and believe your victims. There is a whole lot of healing power in the Start by Believing movement, and that is the movement that I really would like for everyone to focus on. Acknowledging the injustices of the world, especially now, we understand that abuse is not about sex, it's about power and control. And the only reason that these people that we are serving were sexually assaulted is because they came in contact with a person who wanted to sexually assault someone that day. We respect autonomy and the fact that our survivors get to make decisions based off of their lived experiences and the life that they have. We do not ever tell them what they need to do. We give them all of their options and we move forward with that. We definitely always want to hit on safety planning. That is a rule that we have here at Fairhaven is that if you have not safety planned with a client, at some point you have failed at your job. So you need to make sure that you are safety planning with your each individual client to make sure that their safety plan fits the needs of their story and their lived experiences. And then we definitely promote access to community services, and you need to know the resources in your community. I pride myself on Fairhaven being the resource queens of Northwest Indiana. I tell everybody and anybody if they ever need anything, give us a call. We will find access to something somewhere. So get to know those resources in your community so that you know when to refer someone out and where you can refer them out to. So now that we know what an advocate does, sort of, because we're going to break that down a little bit more, we need to understand what we are not. Most importantly, you are not an investigator, a police officer, a detective when you are wearing the hat of an advocate, even if you are that in your real life and you're volunteering at an advocacy center. In those moments, it is not your job to determine if a crime occurred. It is not your job to determine how the crime occurred. It is not your victim's job to prove to you that a crime occurred in order to serve them. You show up and you serve them regardless of if they are choosing to report or not. We are not a sexual assault nurse examiner or a doctor. This one is really important because it's very easy for us as humans, sometimes as moms, as dads, as parents, to kind of brush things off. And I remember I had a survivor who kept talking about this headache, but she had been out the night before and had been partying. So, like, anybody could really chalk that headache up to a hangover, you need some water, you're a little dehydrated, you're in a stressful situation. But even after she reported it to the nurse and she had gotten some medication, the headache just kept getting worse and worse. Come to find out that because we advocated for that, they did a CT scan and she had found that she had had a concussion. So we want to make sure that we're not dismissing anything and we're running things over by a medical examiner so that they can ensure that our victims are taken care of medically first and foremost. You are not a prosecutor or a lawyer. So even if you know the law like the back of your hand, you cannot and will not be able to ever tell a victim exactly what is going to happen in their story and in their case. So make sure that you know that and make sure you know what boundaries you have with explaining the law versus telling them what to expect in their specific case. And above all else, you are not a judge or a jury. Again, some of these cases that you guys are going to get, some of the stories that you are going to hear are going to be horrific. They are going to sound like a Lifetime movie. It is not your job to determine if this actually happened the way that this victim is saying it is. Your job is to show up for them and to provide them with the support and resources, regardless of what type of story it is that they are sharing. So, in Lake County and most counties in the state of Indiana, we work within a sexual assault response team is mandated by law that every county should be a part of a sexual assault response team. So I think most of our county, if I'm looking at the map, has a sexual assault response team that they work within. Your sexual assault response team should be comprised of minimal people, which is, or not minimal people, but at the minimum, the prosecutor's office, law enforcement officers, your sexual assault nurse examiners, your victim advocates, and hopefully you'll have your crime lab there as well. Here in Lake County, we have a pretty big SART and we're grateful to have all of those different people at the table. The whole point of having a sexual assault response team is to be able to provide compassionate, comprehensive evidence collection, emotional support, information, assistance, investigations. Everything about a sexual assault response team should be victim-centered, trauma-informed care. How can we as a team do better for our survivors in our community? And in order for you to be able to have those conversations, you need to have all of the people at the table who are going to be connected to your victim. So your sexual assault response teams may also include your domestic violence and homeless shelters. They may also and should also include your Department of Child Services workers. We have trustees offices that come. We have trying to think. Our police social workers come. Basically anybody who at any point in time may be serving a survivor of sexual assault, they should be coming to these SART meetings. And the reason that we talk about this in SART is because we want to make sure that as an advocate, you're staying in your lane. So I don't know about where you guys are all from. Up here in Northwest Indiana, we have every kind of highway possible. So we have the connection of I-65 and 8094, which 8094 runs crazy. And if you've ever driven on 8094, you know that. So when you are on the highway, so 8094 is a 4-lane highway. When you're on the highway, if everybody stays in their lane, everybody follows the law, and everybody goes the way they're supposed to go. Traffic is supposed to move fairly easy. Everybody gets to where they need to get. When people start swerving in and out of their lane, going way quicker or slower than the rest of the population on the highway, that is when accidents occur. That is when traffic jams happen. So, what we like to say here is that it is very important to know what your role is within your SART and to stay in your lane. Make sure that we are working alongside these other people, but we have to also know when to refer to them. If there is a question being asked about something medical, I am going to refer to our sexual assault nurse examiners because that is their expertise and that is what they know well. If there is a question about the case, I'm going to refer to the law enforcement officer or the prosecutors because they are the expert in that part. And if somebody needs some type of resource, if somebody needs some emotional support, they know to call us, their advocacy center, because that is what we are the expert in. As long as everybody works collaboratively and they work together and they stay in their lane, then all should be well for our victims. And that is what I really want to talk about throughout the rest of our training is how to work collaboratively with our other allied professionals while maintaining your lane and what you are there to do, which is to support that survivor. I also should mention at some point, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I have problems with paying attention to things. So if I see the chat go off, I will end up going off on tangents, and I don't want to do that today. So I will save all the questions till the end, but please feel free to ask any questions if you think of one. So the NOVA Code of Conduct basically states that every person who works for a victim service provider agency, so anyone who's at a rape crisis center, needs to be able to treat and act with integrity and treat all victims of crime with dignity and compassion to uphold the principles of justice for the survivors. If you are not familiar with the full code of conduct by the National Organization for Victims Assistance, I really recommend that you guys go on this website. We actually have the Victim Advocate Code of Conduct in all of our handbooks, including our sexual assault response team protocols. So I would definitely get familiar with these if you were not just yet. But opening this up to now, what exactly is the role of an advocate and why what we do is so important. We are the one and only person who gets to walk alongside the victim the entire time. We are able to provide that continuum of care across the entire lifespan of a case and across the lifespan of how long somebody needs that support. So let's say you have a victim and they go to the hospital. And they have their forensic exam done and they are met by the epitome of what a sexual assault nurse examiner should be. This nurse is attentive, they are victim centered, they are trauma informed, they get a whole lot of evidence. The victim leaves feeling cared for and loved by the nurse is able to package up all this great evidence and send it off to law enforcement who bring it to the lab. And so now that nurse has done a great job. The victim feels cared for and supported and empowered. But once that exam is done and that victim leaves the hospital, the nurse's role is over. So then that victim goes to law enforcement and they report their story to law enforcement. Law enforcement is super attentive, again, very victim centered, trauma informed. They don't victim blame. They get all of this amazing information and they're able to investigate. They are so good that they get a confession from the perpetrator and they get all of this great evidence. They turn it all over to the prosecutor's office and charges are filed. The investigation is done. That law enforcement officer has done a great job. Once that case is done, law enforcement goes away because they have 10, 15, 20 other victims that they have to work with. So let's say now charges are filed because you had this amazing nurse and this amazing officer who've now turned everything over to the prosecutor, and your deputy prosecutor does an amazing job. They take the case to trial and they find this person guilty of a level 1 felony and they go away for 35 years. Awesome. We celebrate that prosecutor. They've done a fantastic job. They've put the bad guy away for as long as they humanly possibly could. And then the prosecutor goes away. This case is now closed. The only person who was there with that victim throughout the entirety of that case has been the victim advocate. They are the person who remains with that victim throughout the entire duration of that judicial case and then afterwards, being able to support them through individual advocacy or groups of support or referrals to therapy or whatever that's going to look like. But as the advocate, you have the opportunity to be with them from the beginning to the end. And that is the best way for us to be able to support our survivors. And that is why the presence of an advocate is so important, because we get to be there every step of the way until that victim no longer needs us. And by doing that work, we're able to offer them this level of privileged communication that not many people in the state of Indiana have. So if you are a systems-based, community-based advocate, you work for the victim. You practice collaboratively with other professionals in the community like law enforcement, the nurses, the prosecutor's office, but you do not work for the prosecutor's office or the law enforcement agency. You work for the victim at an outside entity. If you are one of those community-based advocates, you have privileged communication through the Indiana Code 35376. That's supposed to say 35376, not 27. Let me write a note so I remember. And we actually have that code on the back of our badges so that if anybody was to ever push us, we can explain this is the code that protects the communication. By being able, oh, we're going to get into this in a minute, but we really want to be able to offer victims this level of confidential communication so that they can discuss what they need to discuss with somebody who can never be compelled to testify. We can be subpoenaed. People have tried to get our records. We contact ICASA. They help us. They don't get our records because our communication is privileged by the state of Indiana. However, there are also agency based advocates, and the agency based advocates do the exact same type of work. However, they are employed by law enforcement or the prosecutor's office, and their job is to do everything that we do with victims who have reported to their law enforcement agency or whose cases have been referred to and are being charged by the prosecutor's office. So obviously, as you can see, there are some big gaps in services with agency-based advocates just because not every person who has been sexually assaulted will report to law enforcement. So if they're not reporting, then agency-based advocates don't necessarily offer their support. And additionally, we know that most cases don't end up getting charged by the prosecutor's office. So there's another gap in services there. Additionally, if they are agency-based advocates, that communication is used to help better the case. They are taking all this information and they are giving it to the investigators to help strengthen the case. So they do not have the same level of privileged communication that a community-based advocate does in the state of Indiana. So the reason that we have this privileged communication is first and foremost, it's the victim's right. So in the state of Indiana in 2020, during the middle of the pandemic, we passed victims' rights across the state of Indiana. And that means if you are the victim of a sexual assault in our state, you have rights that are guaranteed to you by law. And the right to have privileged communication with a victim advocate at a rape crisis center is one of those guaranteed rights by our statute. This also gives the victim control of their disclosure and it helps keep them safe. So if I have a victim who is in the middle of, they had just been sexually assaulted and they are doing what every victim does and they're blaming themselves and they're figuring it out in their brain and they say, well, this person has always given me the heebie jeebies, but I thought I was just being crazy. So I decided to go out with them anyways because I didn't want to look like a crazy person. And I knew something bad was going to happen because I felt it, but I went anyways. A defense attorney can easily twist that around to be like, no, 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 no. This person knew exactly what they were going into. So therefore, it's not my client's fault. It's the victim's fault because they knew. And so therefore that was consensual. We don't ever want to give defense attorneys any information that they can spin to help their turd of clients, the worst of the worst. And so we want to make sure that our victims have the ability, sorry, my charger is being wonky, to talk through, verbally process what has happened to them with a safe person without ever having to worry about their words being in front of a judge or a jury. I do want to go ahead and say that even as a community-based advocate who cannot be compelled to testify, who has to, by law, protect all of the communication between a victim of sexual assault and in their role as an advocate, we do still have mandated reporting in the state of Indiana. So, of course, if the client that you are serving discloses that they want to kill themselves, discloses that they want to kill someone else, an identified person, or discloses that they or you're made aware of child abuse or neglect, the abuse or neglect of an elderly person, the abuse of or neglect of a person with disabilities. We are still mandated in the state of Indiana to report those. But if they do not disclose any of those things to you, then everything that you share with that victim is 100% confidential. Speaking more on victims' rights, this is just a brief overview. We all have, oh, let me get this here. I don't know if you guys have them. I'm sure you do, but in the state of Indiana, they have these brochures. We're blurry. They look like that. All of the rights can be found on the Lake County START page and also on ICJI's page. By law, it's required that victims of sexual assault receive these brochures. So we have them by the tens of thousands here at Fairhaven because my boss loves printing materials and making sure that everybody has them. So, victims' rights guarantee that a victim of sexual assault have the right to a victim advocate prior to, during, and after a medical forensic exam or prior to, during, and after reporting to a law enforcement agency. They retain these rights regardless of if they choose to further report, if they choose to no longer participate in the criminal proceedings, they still get to keep these rights. These rights are afforded to victims whether they report or not, whether they have medical forensic exams performed or not. They have the right to be informed of their rights under Indiana law prior to an investigation and prior to that forensic exam. So, in a perfect world, the victim is getting their victim's rights and being told about advocacy prior to ever having to interact with law enforcement or having that exam done so that they could have that time with an advocate to discuss all of their options to make sure that they know and are okay with everything that is about to happen. All right. So now that I've given you some background on a sexual assault response team, which I'm sure you guys will get a training on, I've given you some background on victims' rights. I'm now going to jump in the advocacy road of what does it mean to be an advocate and what does it mean to do this work. Like I said in the beginning, at the top of the tier, the most important thing as a victim advocate is to listen and believe your client. Oftentimes, you are going to be the first and maybe only person who believes that victim. So you want to show up and you want to show them all the respect in the world, and you want to listen to what it is that they have to say. And at some point during your initial time with that victim. Oftentimes, we're talking about within the first 24, 36, 72 hours of an exam or of an assault. At some point during that time, you want to tell your victim that you believe them and that it's not their fault. That is so important. And like I said, we have a whole advocacy platform on Start by Believing if you're not familiar. It's such an important piece of the disclosure of a sexual assault. Oftentimes, our victims are already second guessing if they're going to be believed, already not maybe even believing it themselves. So, being able to be that first person to say, hey, I see you, I hear you, I believe you is really, really important. We're obviously there to provide support, and support looks different for different people. There are some people whose primary need for support is going to be emotional, who is just unable in that moment to facilitate what it is that they need to do. Because as you're going to learn from neurobiology of trauma, when a traumatic event occurs, your prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain that is set up to make decisions, is impacted. It shuts down. So you're able to show up and provide them with that support and help them figure out, first and foremost, what is the most important decisions that they have to make, and then help them figure out with those decisions what way they want to go about it. So, do they want to report? Do they want to have a medical forensic exam done? And help them decide what consequences of those decisions they can live with. I know, like I said, I'm a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. I've never reported anything that my abuser did to me. And I knew that when I made my decision, when I left him to not report, I was doing it for very personal reasons, but I also knew that the consequences of that were going to be that I'm going to have to co-parent with him. I'm going to have to see him. I'm going to have to maintain a level of communication with a person who I really don't want to communicate. But at the time that I made that decision, it was the decision that was best for me. And that was the choice of consequences that I felt most comfortable with. So just understand that it's the victim who's going to have to live with those consequences, and making sure that the victim understands whatever the consequences are of the decisions that they are making. We help maintain that confidentiality. Again, we want to be that safe space for them to share whatever it is that they need to share with you. And we are able to offer that confidential communication to that victim. We do not judge, and it is so easy. I'm a judgmental queen. I know that. And it is one of the things that I absolutely hate the most about myself. But we are humans. But in the role of an advocate, my judgment goes out the window because it's not about what I think about these victims. It's not about what I think about these stories. It's about making sure that that victim feels heard, loved, empowered, and seen by us so that they can continue on their path of healing. And another really, really, really important tenet of advocacy is healthy boundaries. When I started this work, I thought I had to be a superhero and that being a good advocate meant being an emotional support person and available to my clients 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Very quickly learned that that is not what makes a good advocate. Our agency is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But I have much more to my life than just being a victim advocate. I am also a mom. I am also a wife. I am also a friend and a pillar in our community. It is okay that you are not available to your clients 24/7. So making sure that you understand what it is you can and will provide your victims, how you can provide that support, and it and then maintaining those boundaries and maintaining the fact that you cannot be this person's only support system forever. You have to help them get acquainted with other supports in the community and maintain those healthy boundaries. If you do not have healthy boundaries in this work, you will burn out. You will burn out quickly because victims of any type of trauma need support and love. And unfortunately, we are dealing with very messy people, and very messy people do not necessarily understand what healthy boundaries are. So they will push you and they will push you and they will push you. And when you get pushed too many times, you end up just stepping away from the arena. So I want to make sure that you guys are doing whatever it is that you have to do to maintain those healthy boundaries. And everybody's boundaries are going to look a little bit differently with this work. One of the best ways to maintain boundaries that I've learned is through the empowerment model. The empowerment model is basically when we are able to help individuals gain power, access to resources, and controls over their own life. By doing and working under the empowerment model, we're helping them achieve their highest personal goals and reminding them that they can do this, which is why it's so silly that, like, I have so many examples of where the empowerment model have worked, but like, this is the epitome of what I always tell my victims, like, I can't do this for you, but I can stand by you and cheer you on while you do it for yourself. Nobody can heal for someone else. Nobody could do the work of healing. And nobody knows that better than me, who is currently a year into extremely deep trauma therapy. It's super fun. Recommend it for everyone. But the only way that it's going to work with my therapist is if I do the work. If I blame and cast my blame on everyone else, or I asked everybody else to do the work for me, it's not going to work. So the empowerment model is really great when you're able to say, here are your choices. I'm going to help you figure out which choice you want to make. And I'm going to help you and support you while you achieve that goal. But I'm not achieving the goal for you. You have to do the hard work, unfortunately.
Hey, Becca, sorry to interrupt. I just realized, and Whitney brought it to my attention, that you're in, on our side, you're in the presenter mode. Can you flip it so that we can see your full screen, or so we can see the
Oh,
full slide?
shoot. How do I do that?
Up under display settings,
On the
there should,
PowerPoint?
yeah, maybe hide presenter view.
I was gonna say it shows on ours your display settings up at the top on the left side.
Yeah, I think the problem is it flips when you hit
Let's do this.
some kind of slide.
Huh. Let me stop. I know what it is. Hold on. I'm going to stop sharing, guys. 1 second.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. I totally missed it completely.
Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had it on two screens. So let me see if I take it off of that.
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that, guys. Everybody can still hear me? Okay. My bad. I didn't even realize that was happening. So I'm so sorry. All right. So this is the standard that we have written into our sexual assault response team protocols for sexual assault victim advocacy. And this states that victims of sexual assault will be provided the opportunity to have the support of a sexual assault victim advocate prior to, during, and after all medical and legal proceedings. So again, our standards and our sexual assault response team mimic that of the victims' rights that has been afforded to our victims as of 2020. And so we do this in multiple different ways. We do this by means of our crisis line. We do this by means of our medical advocacy at the bedside. We do this by means of our judicial advocacy within the court system. And then we also do this through the continuing services here at Fairhaven with, individual sessions, support groups, those types of things. And we're going to kind of touch base on all four different elements of victim advocacy. However, the primary focus of the work that I'm going to be sharing with you today is going to be medical advocacy and acute crisis intervention. So, when you're dealing with somebody in the very beginning stages, so this is somebody who was just sexually assaulted within the first 72 hours, 120 hours, because of the way that we have evidence collection here in the state of Indiana, we're talking about the first 5 days after a crisis happens, and that we are going to come in, we're going to meet them where we're at, and we're going to be targeting the response that they are having to this traumatic event. And by doing that, we are going to be able to first and foremost establish a sense of safety. Safety is such an important piece of this work that we're doing. Being a safe person so that we can bear witness to someone's story, being a safe person and a trustworthy person with dignity and respect so that we can show our victims what it means to report, so that they also know that they have a safe person with them every step of the way. A sense of safety also means safety planning with your victim, making sure that they're going to remain safe when they go home and they know what to do if they are no longer feeling safe. By doing this also helps calm the victim, because when you walk into a room with a person who has just been traumatized, oftentimes tensions are way over here. They're super high in the room. Everyone's very activated. Everyone is feeling all types of emotions because this horrible, terrible thing just occurred. And you're going to walk in with your victim advocate voice. You're going to walk in with your victim advocacy, chill vibes that you have and you bring to the room. And by doing that, you're going to help bring the tensions down. You're going to remind this victim that they are not alone. You're there with them every step of the way, and that you're going to help shoulder this burden with them. And then tensions are going to they're going to go back up, and then you're going to be able to bring them back down. And you're going to be able to help establish that sense of safety and calm in the room for that victim, reminding them that, hey, this may be the worst day that you've ever experienced. And I'm not going to say anything about that. What I am going to say is that you've had bad days before. And while this may be the absolute worst thing that you've ever gone through, you do know how to move forward when you've had a bad day. So we're going to be able to remind them that they have the ability to solve problems. They have the ability to make decisions. They have the ability to direct the rest of the team in what it is that this victim wants to do, even though in that moment they feel like they don't. We're going to help remind them of that. We're going to help them establish a social support. There are more people in this world who are super alone than there are people who have a great support system. And so oftentimes when you walk in the room, you are the support system, that you are all they have. So by walking into the room, I'm not just providing them the support and love of me, Becca Hatfield. I am giving them 10 other advocates in their back corner, because I know my team is going to have their back just as much as I do. And so they are no longer just Becca's client, they're now Fairhaven's client. And now they have been invited into the Fairhaven bubble. And once they get into the Fairhaven bubble, not only do they have the support of all 10 advocates that do direct services, 18 of us that work here at Fairhaven, but they also have the support of our Survivor Alliance Council. They have the support of the support groups that they attend. We're going to help build their support system so that they'd feel less alone. And most importantly, you're fostering some hope. I know that not every single person who is listening to me talk right now is a survivor of sexual assault. I recognize that. But I do also know that probably majority of you in this room have your own story or know somebody who has a story. So when I walk in, I'm not Becca Hatfield, Director of Client Services at Fairhaven. I walk into the room as Becca Hatfield. I'm a survivor of sexual assault and domestic violence. And I am able to remember this super dark time in my life and what I needed in that moment. And I'm able to recognize a super dark period in this victim's life. And I'm able to kind of have an understanding. My lived experiences are very different than their lived experiences. However, we have a common ground, and we're able to show those victims that today sucks. It does. And you're not going to make it better. And tomorrow's going to suck. And you probably won't make it better for them either. But one day it's not going to suck. One day they're going to be able to look back at their experience and recognize that they have been able to survive it and grow from it. And that hope is what keeps us going on the real, real, real crappy days, is to know that even though it's crappy today and it might be crappy tomorrow, it's not going to be crappy forever. And that is one of the most important pieces of the victim advocacy work that you're going to do, is to help foster and instill that hope in the survivors. So, some important notes about crisis intervention. Most individuals who are exposed to a traumatic event are not going to need. Ooh, what just happened? Sorry, my little holder thingy just went wonky. Most individuals who are exposed to a traumatic event are not going to need formal psychological intervention. Most people, once you provide them with that crisis intervention, that's all they need. And they'll say, you know what? I'm good. I don't need any of those services. That's totally fine. It means crisis intervention worked. We want to also remember that normalizing the crisis response has to be encouraged. So you're going to see me when we get into the Safe R model in a minute. One of the things that I like to say to all of my survivors is that you are experiencing a very normal, common response to trauma, a very normal, common response to something that is very abnormal that happened to you. Nobody should be assaulted, and that is not normal. However, your response to this is very common. But just because most of the times you're going to want to normalize their crisis response, we have to remember that there are also serious crisis response. There are abnormal responses to the trauma. And if you have somebody who is at risk for harming themselves or killing someone else, those thought processes are an abnormal response to trauma. And we want to make sure that we are not dismissing that. We want to make sure that we are being mindful of the serious reactions to trauma, that we're not just dismissing it. Additionally, crisis intervention always should be voluntary, even with them giving consent to have an advocate present. If you walk in that room and they ask you to leave, it is not your fault. It is not anything you've done wrong. It's just that they want to be left alone in that moment. And that is okay. You give them the resources, you give them their response bag if you guys have them. You remind them that if they change their mind, you can always come back or chat another day. But the crisis intervention should always be voluntary. Also, you're not going to interfere with their natural recovery and coping mechanisms. In a moment of crisis, harm reduction is the way to go. If somebody would have told me on the day that my dad died that I couldn't go home and have a White Claw, I would have punched them. Because on the worst day of your life, you are not changing coping mechanisms. You are going to use harm reduction and try to help them understand that there are healthier ways to cope. However, you're not going to interfere with that natural coping mechanism, that natural recovery that they are going to go back to. So if you're working with somebody who uses substances as a means of coping, harm reduction is going to be your number one way. Instead of drinking the 6-pack, can you have 5 tonight? Instead of buying a fifth of alcohol, can you buy a pint? Instead of, if you're going to go home and use opioids or something else, do you have somebody who you can safely use with? I know there are hotlines where you can call so that they maintain, they're on the phone with you. Do you have Narcan? These are just basic safety planning skills that you are going to want to use with your victims. Because if you tell somebody who is facing a substance abuse problem that they cannot go home and use, they're going to probably just dismiss you right away. You're not changing the way that they normally cope in those moments. So I'm not saying encourage it in any way, shape, or form. However, just know that you're not going to be able to interfere with what it is that they're going to do. So how are we going to do it in the safest way possible? You do not ever want to make someone talk about or relive their event unless they're comfortable doing so. If they don't want to talk about it, that is totally fine. If they do want to talk about it, you're going to tell them, hey, I'm not somebody who needs to know this, but if you need to chat about it, I am here to listen. When in doubt, always seek assistance. The way that we work up here in Northwest Indiana, it's just impossible for you to always have a supervisor in your back corner when you're at a hospital, obviously, but we are always available by phone, by text. Call us, text us. We always would recommend that our advocates ask for support and ask for assistance before they make a decision that they may not be sure of. So when in doubt, always ask for assistance. If as an agency you are confused, seek help from ICASA. We have called them numerous times when we're like, hey, this is a little wonky. What do we do with this? Always, always, always seek assistance. It is okay to say, you know what? I don't have an answer for that question right now. Let me find somebody who does. Oftentimes, the first interaction that we have with a victim is over our crisis line. I have a whole hour-long training on crisis line advocacy, but the very basics of crisis line advocacy starts with introducing yourself and making sure that they know what your name is and asking if you can use theirs. A lot of the times they don't want to give it to you, and that is okay. After you introduce yourself, you want to establish safety. Are you safe right now to talk? Obviously, if they are not, we need to then immediately move into safety planning and what we can do to get them safe? Do we need to call 911? What is your address? Those types of questions. If they are safe, though, at that point, you're using your effective listening skills. You're using crisis communication techniques that we will go over shortly, and figuring out what their immediate concern is. Is this somebody who is within the 5-day window? Do we need to discuss activating SART protocols and getting them to a hospital? Go over the options of reporting with them. Go over their options for having that forensic exam done. You want to explain all of the available services and let them know that as the advocacy center, you can go with them to the hospital. If they're outside of your service area, okay, let me find the service provider in your service area who can go with you. You're going to want to go over their victims' rights because, again, there is no statute of limitations on those victims' rights. If you're a victim of a sexual assault in the state of Indiana, those rights are afforded to you. So you want to make sure you go over that with your victims and remind them that they can change their mind at any point in time and that their rights are still going to be upheld. You also want to discuss and encourage medical treatment because it's not just about collecting the evidence, it's also about making sure that physically they are okay, that physically and medically they are checked out and made sure that there are no injuries that they are unaware of. And ultimately, you got to respect their decision. There are going to be people who call the crisis line who say that they were just assaulted and all they just needed to do was talk. If they do not want to report, that is okay. I feel like I've said that a million times, but that's going to be, it'll probably come up again. Okay, moving into the SAFE R model. This is a model that was established by the International Critical Incident Trust Foundation. We've taken it and chosen to adapt it for working with medical forensic clients in the hospital and any other time that we have to do acute crisis intervention. This is a crisis intervention model. First and foremost is stabilization, acknowledgement, facilitation of understanding, encourage effective coping, and then the restoration of adaptive and normal functioning or a referral. We're going to break this down a little bit. First and foremost, notes from me, your seasoned advocate in our community. When you go to the hospital, you want to make sure that you have, if your agency provides them, your response bags. So here at Fairhaven, we carry around 5 different bags of clothing. They have 5 different sizes of a t-shirt, sweatpants, underwear, socks, bra, boxers. We carry bags for both female and male. We have different toiletries in that bag. Oftentimes we bring a blanket. These are just things that our volunteers and our agency are able to provide. So if you're able to bring those response bags, make sure you have them with you. Make sure you have resources with you. We have a resource packet that has all the standard resources, but you want to make sure that you have something to give that victim in case they have more needs than just the initial crisis intervention. Make sure you have all your paperwork with you because, paperwork is what makes the world go round. And if you are an agency that has a badge, make sure you have it on. But I always keep my badge faced inward. Nobody needs to know who I am and why I'm there, except for the main front desk lady, because they're going to be the ones that let you in to see your victim. Almost always you're reporting to the ER unless you are one of those fancy counties that have a sexual assault center. I want one of those. We don't have one of those. So almost always, if you're going to a hospital, you're going in through the ER. If you're going somewhere else, usually they will let you know. So we've responded to like labor and delivery. We've responded to behavioral health units. We've responded to intermediate care units, but almost always the nurse gives us that heads up. Most important thing, eat before you go to the hospital. And I know that sounds silly, but I promise you, if you do not eat before you go to the hospital, by the time they get to the fingernail scrapings, your tummy is going to be grumbling. Most hospital calls last anywhere from 4 to 7 hours, at least in our community. If you are in an area that has a sane shortage, sometimes that wait may be a little longer. Eat before you go because you're not chowing down on a hamburger in front of your client. So if you just ate, stuff another piece of pizza in your mouth before you leave. You want to make sure you have something to eat before you go. If not, you will be like me, stuffing Snickers in your mouth when you tell your victim you're going to the bathroom. You don't want to have to do that. So just eat before you go, please. So you get to the hospital, you walk in, and now you are starting the step 1 in the SAFE R model, which is stabilization. You are going to walk in and introduce yourself. You're going to talk in very easy terms for everybody to understand. Hi, I am Becca. I'm a victim advocate at Fairhaven Rape Crisis Center. Did anybody tell you that I was coming? And sometimes they're going to say yes. Sometimes they're going to say no. I don't care what they say. I oftentimes will say, is it okay that I explain a little bit about me and about the role that I play here with you today? If they say yes, then I'm going to continue. That level of providing that victim the control in the room is super important. You're dealing with people who have just had all autonomy taken from them. They have had no way of maintaining their level of power and control. So you want to give them power and control in every way, shape, or form that you can. Is it okay that I come in? Is it okay that I stay? Where would you like me to sit? These are all small, little tiny ways that you're able to give that victim a little bit of support and power and control back in the room. Once they give me permission to stay, I then break down a little bit about what it is that I do. I do not work for the hospital. I do not work for the police. I'm here to work for you. You go over a little bit of whatever it is that your agency can provide. So Fairhaven, we're able to provide those wraparound services and say that we're able to be with them every step of the way. We can go to court with them. We can go with them for orders of protection. We could do all of these different things. And then within the first couple of minutes, you really want to hit your limitations. This is informed consent 101. You want to make sure that right away, when it's appropriate, they know that you are still a mandated reporter in the state of Indiana. Even though you have that privileged communication, if they tell you they want to kill themselves, someone else, or you're made aware of any of the abuse or neglect of a person, you do have to report that to the authorities, and you want to make sure they know that. I never want somebody to be blindsided by the fact that I have to report to DCS when there's been a child sexual assault. So I want to make sure that those limitations are explained right in the beginning. And then from there, you're going to establish rapport. And that looks a little different depending on the person that you are, depending on the person that you're serving, depending on the situation that you are in. Sometimes establishing rapport may be cracking a joke. Sometimes establishing rapport may be stepping in and sitting with them in the yuck. Sometimes that may be just asking the question of, is there, and one of my favorite questions to ask is there any questions that you have that I can answer to help alleviate some of the anxiety that you may be feeling right now? Is there any part of the exam that I can explain to you? Has anybody told you what to expect while you're here today? How long have you been here? Is there any of your immediate needs that need to be met? Oftentimes, unfortunately, you have a victim, they present to the hospital, they have rules and they call the SANE out, they put this victim into a room, and then nobody talks to them until the SANE gets there. So by the time I get there, they really have to go to the bathroom. They are dying of thirst. Any of these different things. So I'm going to be the one that's like, okay, I know you need to go to, you got to pee in the cup. So let me go find the nurse to get the cup so that you can go to the bathroom. Maybe they're freezing and they need a blanket. So you're going to be able to help facilitate that. That's the way I usually choose to establish rapport. Other people will choose like a necklace, a pair of earrings, something like that to kind of be like, hey, I really like that necklace. Where did you get it? Do something, some kind of small talk to start building a relationship and building trust with that client. So from there, we usually, if we were in person, would do a 2-minute commercial. You've got about 2 minutes to make an impression on this victim. So I want you to practice your 2-minute commercials. We won't obviously do it because we're in a Zoom room, but really practice what it is that you're going to say when you get to the hospital. I haven't been on a hospital call in probably a year. I've gone on more than 100 of them. And if I was to be called out today, I would do my 2-minute commercial in my head on my way to the hospital so that I remember and I'm constantly thinking about what it is I'm going to say. All right. So after that, we're moving into the acknowledgement phase of this. So this is when the victim may feel like they want to share parts of their story with you. This is the one and only time that I will interrupt a victim. If they start going into what happened to them, I will stop them and say, listen, if you need to talk about this, I am here to listen to you. If you need to process this verbally, I'm your lady. If you don't want to talk about this, though, I am not somebody who needs to know what happened in order to be here with you. And so half the time they're going to say, oh, thank you, Jesus. I do not want to talk about this anymore. Can we please just talk about Bad Bunny playing at the Super Bowl this year? Absolutely, we can talk about that. The other half of the time, they're going to say, absolutely no, I need to talk about this with somebody. You said you're a safe person that I can share with you, so I'm going to do that. And that's totally fine. I'm here to listen. But I just want to make sure that they know that they are not required to tell me what happened in order for me to serve them. But during this phase, you're oftentimes getting ready for the exam to get started. The nurse is prepping the area. This is when you're going to start formulating your acute crisis intervention plan. How did they get there? Did they come by ambulance? Did somebody drop them off? Did they drive themselves? Because that's going to help you figure out how the heck are they getting home? Do you need to provide them with a ride home? Because I don't know about you guys, but certain communities, it takes a while to be able to get an Uber or a Lyft scheduled. Some communities don't even have Uber or Lyft because they're super rural. So making sure that you're able to formulate, how are we getting this person home? Oh, went forward. Is home safe right now? Does home exist? Do these people even have a safe place to go? And if they don't, now we're going to have to start calling our local domestic violence shelters, say that, and now realize that most of the rape crisis centers in the state of Indiana are dual service provider and probably work with domestic violence survivors at some point. So you guys probably are already familiar with your shelter. We are one of very few in the state of Indiana that does not have a domestic violence shelter connected to us. We are 100% non-residential as it stands. So we need to rely on our partners in the community to help get them somewhere safe. If home is safe, do they have somebody that can stay with them? Do they have somewhere that they can go to stay with someone safe so that they are not alone? We're going to start figuring out all these little bits of this plan in this stage. The most important thing about this stage, though, guys, is to be tolerant of silence. I am actually Chandler Bing in my real life. I hate silence. I want to crack jokes. It's very uncomfortable for me to be in silence. It's a trauma response. Silence meant bad things happening in my life for 12 years. So I'm not very good at it. And so the way that I work on that is I tell my clients, hey, listen, I totally respect that you just kind of want to sit here and just kind of process through what happened. You might want to watch a little bit of TV. Totally understand that. I'm going to ask you, because it is my job to ask you every couple of minutes, are you doing okay? Do you need anything? Are there any questions that you have? Anything you want to chat about? I'm sorry I'm going to get annoying, but you can just tell me, no, I'm okay. And then I'll shut up again. You wanna make sure that you're able to give the client that silence if that is what they need. So you do become a little bit better at being tolerant of silence. I've gotten better over the years, but just be mindful that not everybody wants to yap as much as me, and that's okay. They don't have to talk to me as much as I can talk. I can be quiet if they need me to be. The next stage of crisis intervention is the facilitation of understanding. So oftentimes this is when your victim is now moving through the forensic exam. They're sharing their experiences. They're telling their story to the nurse. They're having this incredibly invasive exam done on their body. During this time, you are validating their pain. You are validating their frustration, their anger, their sadness, their emotions in this moment. Not stepping 10 toes down into their emotion, but putting a foot in there and recognizing and understanding their anger. Yeah, you have every right to be angry. This is not okay. This should have never happened. Stepping into their sadness, stepping into their pain, but never, ever, ever to the extent of theirs. I just did a volunteer training last week, and one of the volunteers was like, well, what happens if I start crying? Do not sob in front of these victims, please. But like, it is also really hard, like when you're dealing with a child, for instance, and they are sobbing. You are a human, you're going to have human emotions. So just be mindful of how you validate their pain. You're not going to make it about you. And I feel like that should be common sense, but we've had some rogue advocates in the past who have not always listened to that. So just make sure that you are validating and stepping into their emotion, but not as far in as they are. During this time, you're also going to use your crisis communication techniques. You're going to be paraphrasing. You're going to be checking in for understanding to make sure that you are hearing what it is that that victim is saying. You're going to help normalize their normal reaction to an abnormal event. They are going to feel like they are going crazy. They are going to feel like they are to blame for what happened to them. You're going to hear about neurobiology of trauma at some point during Core 40, and you're going to hear and understand why it is that they react this way. But it's, you know, roller coaster of emotions because of all these hormones that are flooded through their brain through their trauma responses. Your brain kind of picks what way we're going to respond, and then your body gets flooded with all these hormones, and now you are completely out of control. So you may have a victim who is laughing 1 minute, crying the next, completely dissociates the next minute, completely numb the next minute. These are all normal reactions to an abnormal event, and that is okay. So you want to help dispel those myths of vulnerability. No, this is not your fault. The only reason you were raped was because you came in contact with a rapist. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your behavior. It has nothing to do with what you were wearing. You got raped because you came in contact with a rapist. And a rapist is somebody who is a terrible human being. And there is no reason for us to be able to understand why this happened because you're a good person. And I've racked my brain for 10 years of trying to figure out why bad people do bad things. And I can't figure it out because I'm not a bad person. And that is okay. Also, during this time, if during the forensic exam you have been kicked out of the room because they are in control in that room, this is where you're able to also assist family members and friends if they are available and if it's needed. Keep in mind that you can go into this room with a victim and do 7 hours of beautiful work. You're not victim blaming, you're empowering, you're reminding them of their autonomy. You are doing everything awesome. The second they go to their loved one and their loved one hits them with one of their why questions. Why did you go to the party? Why would you go out? Why did you do this? It immediately undoes all of the work that you just did because essentially I'm a stranger. And if a stranger tells me I'm a great person and I did great things and that none of this was my fault, but my mom blames me, I don't care what the stranger is saying. I care about what my mom is saying. So you want to educate family members and friends, whoever it is that they are going home with, about what to expect, about that roller coaster of emotions, about all the hormones that may have flooded through their body, and also about please, please, please keep in mind that why questions, even when they are well intended, often always come off as victim blaming. So helping them understand what to say, what not to say when they are going home so that the work that you've just done doesn't become undone by their loved ones. The next is to encourage effective coping. So now, your victim is done with their forensic exam. Now it's time to make sure all of their basic human needs are being met. So again, are they going home to a safe shelter? Do they have food at home? Do they need to take a shower? Do they have to go to the bathroom? All those very basic needs being met in the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we cannot get those basic needs met, then moving up to safety and security, moving up to healthy relationships, it's just not going to work. You have to get those basic needs met because what the heck do you mean I have to worry about safety and stability when I've got to get to work because if I don't go to work, I don't have food on the table for my kids. No, I absolutely cannot take a day off of work. I've got to go in. So you want to make sure that those basic needs are being met. This is going to then help you once you know that they have somewhere safe to go, that where they're going to have their basic needs met. We can then move into safety and making sure that we're able to safety plan with that client. Now we're transitioning towards discharge. So they're getting their medication. You're going to want to make sure that they're educated on how that medication may affect their body. You want to make sure that they have something in their stomach before they take all the meds. Meds are heavy. So you want to make sure, even if it's just a couple crackers and a couple sips of Gatorade, that they have something in their belly. And then, of course, like I said, a physical or emotional safety plan. If they are going somewhere physically safe, their abuser has been picked up and is in jail, whatever that may look like, okay. What about an emotional safety plan? Are they at risk for relapse? Are they at risk for self harm? Are they at risk for suicidal ideation? What does that look like before you move them and let them go home? This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs that I just chatted about. These two down here, they're basic needs. These are what we are trying to meet when we are working with our survivors. Again, making sure that they have something in their stomach, they have somewhere safe to go, they're able to rest. What does that safety plan look like? If we're able to provide these two bottom tiers, then they're able to move up to their psychological needs, which includes safe relationships, healthy relationships, and so on and so forth. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically the framework that I personally and us at Fairhaven work under. It's very important. I even have it framed in my office. You want to make sure that you're meeting those bottom needs because you cannot safety plan with somebody who doesn't give a crap about safety because their kids are at home alone and they need to get home to their kids. The last stage of the SAFE R model is the restoration of adaptive functioning or a referral. So this is where if they have, okay, you've done all of your work, they're ready to be discharged, they are not being held at the hospital for a medical reason or behavioral health reason. Now we are walking out with our client. We want to make sure that you have a good contact number for them. You cannot offer follow-up services if you don't have a phone number for them. Okay, a lot of the times their phones get stolen. Do they have a safe person that they will give you permission to call so that you can contact them? If not, make sure they have your contact information, your 24-hour crisis line, your office line, and let them know what you are available to do. Also find out when is the appropriate time to talk to them. If this is somebody who's having a really negative, really hard response to the trauma that they've gone through, you might not want to wait the 72 hours. You might want to call them the next day to check in on them, but agree on a time that you're going to call them. And then we discharge, they leave. This is when you walk out with your victim. Sometimes they want a hug, sometimes they don't. Kind of depends on what it is that they need. But at that moment, you walk out with them. You remind them that you're there and that Fairhaven, well, don't tell them. I mean, you could tell them Fairhaven's there. We'll be there for them, but you'll let them know that your agency is there for them. This is how they can get in contact with somebody if they need it. After that, call whoever it is that you need to call, whatever that system looks like within your agency. But there you go. You have done your job and you've done it well. From there on, this is what we're able to do up here at Fairhaven. We're able to move forward within the judicial system. So oftentimes, if they're choosing to report, the officer will come to their bedside and take an initial report, but they will want the victims to go in for some form of an AV interview, a FAB interview, a forensic interview. They're called all different things. Basically, they want the victim to come into the police department so that they can record them giving their statement. We can go with them for that, and we educate our victims on that. Oftentimes at the 72-hour call, that will already have been scheduled. So you want to let your victims know that you can go with them to that. A lot of the times they need protective orders. You let them know that we can go with them to the courthouse and get that taken care of. Toward the end of their time in the system with if charges go through, victim impact statement preparations are a very big part of that. They are very healing, but a lot of emotions usually come out with that. So being there as a supportive person while they're putting their victim impact statement together is also something that we can do. We go with them to court. We go with them to meet with the prosecutor's office. You want to make sure that you're able to offer that if that's something that your agency does. When you go for a follow-up interview with law enforcement, it is best practice that their forensic interviews are 2 to 3 sleep cycles after that initial event. Again, when an initial event happens and a traumatic experience occurs, our bodies are flooded with all of these hormones and our prefrontal cortex shuts down. So you want to wait until these hormones have really been cycled out of the body for that prefrontal cortex to start re-engaging so that they are able to put together their statement. However, I mean, safety is a real thing. Oftentimes, if we have somebody who is a risk to public safety, our law enforcement friends may want to get the forensic interviews done a little bit sooner. Just know that best practice is 2 to 3 sleep cycles. Remember, when you're working with law enforcement, you are there to work collaboratively with them, not combatively. A lot of the work within law enforcement is going to be education on who you are and what role you play. That is okay. Just remember that you are a guest in their home. When you walk in that police department, you are not there as a police officer. Obviously, you're there as an advocate. So you want to make sure that you're focusing on your client and not the case. You're focusing on your client's response to the story that they are sharing, not the information that they are giving. You should never investigate anything that you learn in that room. That is for law enforcement to do. And remember that if you have a question to ask law enforcement, do it privately unless your victim wants you to ask a question on their behalf. Orders of protection are a long day. We are not set up to do them in the office. I don't know how to get set up to do them in the office. So unfortunately, our friends have to go to the courthouse to do this. When you're going and bringing a client to the courthouse for orders of protection, you want to make sure that you encourage them to bring the information that they're going to need. Most importantly, you need a name of the perp. You need the address that can be found on police reports. So making sure that you get them copies of those police reports and any other documentation or evidence that they may have. You meet them at the courthouse. We do not fill out the paperwork for them. Remember the empowerment model, but we will be there with them while they fill out the paperwork. Obviously, that goes out if you are dealing with somebody who has a disability of some sort who can't write it. But oftentimes the courthouse also has advocates who are there who are able to help filling out that paperwork as well. But it's a good idea to look at the information beforehand, look at the paperwork beforehand, and have a basic understanding to it because your victim is bound to have questions at some point. When you go to the courtroom, make sure you keep yourself focused on the victim. I don't know about you guys. I personally love court. It's one of my favorite parts of this job is going in, mostly because I love hearing how dumb some defendants are. But when I'm in court with a victim, my 100% focus needs to be on that victim and aware of the surroundings around us. Most of the time, these perpetrators have bonded out, which means they're in the galley with you. So you want to make sure that you're keeping physical distance from your perpetrator. You are using your body to block the view from the perpetrator to the victim. You are keeping your victim as far away from their perpetrator as possible. I always recommend building some rapport with your bailiffs in your courtrooms. We have 4 felony courtrooms, so and they are always switching bailiffs, so it gets kind of hard. But the bailiffs that we do work with and I've worked with for a long time, they recognize me and know who I am, so they are able to take extra care and make sure that the perpetrator remains away from the victim, which is really great. Always bring tissue. You never know how somebody's going to react when they see their perpetrator, especially for the first time. If this is the first time they're seeing this person after their assault, they may laugh, they may cry, they may dissociate, whatever that looks like. So you want to make sure you have tissue and you're prepared for it. Have a plan for after all of these court proceedings are done. I love going out to eat with my clients after, a guilty verdict is brought in or a plea agreement or whatever that looks like. You want to have a plan for how we're going to process what happens at the end of this case, whether it's this person is found guilty or this person is acquitted. My plan almost always includes eating pizza. Pepperoni pizza is one of my favorite coping mechanisms. So make sure you have a plan in place for what this victim is going to do after the court system is finished with their case. Victim impact statements are a great way for a client to be able to express to the court how the crime has affected them and their loved ones. What was the emotional, physical, financial impact on this crime? Did this person lose their job? Did this person lose educational opportunities? Did this person just lose the freedom of safety and what it feels like to be safe in this community? How has this crime affected the victim? This is the one and only time, a lot of the times, that the victim's voice gets to be heard in the courtroom. So they are able to really use this as a way to speak and make sure that the judge hears them. Our rules is basically you can't tell somebody that you hope they die, and don't use the F word or any other bad words. Sometimes they still come out. Sometimes our judges are okay with it. But other than that, for the most part, I had a 12-year-old and her victim impact statement. I don't know how it got approved by the prosecutor and the judge, but she was able to say, like, she hopes that the pig goes to the slaughterhouse, which that was just a fun little ditty in there. You always want to, or they don't always have to, but they are able to give their recommendations for the disposition of the case. What do you hope the judge does? So you're allowed to say, I hope that you sentence this person to forever in jail. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen, but victim impact statements are very important for the healing of the victim. Most judges do not and can't, well, judges are not supposed to take victim impact statements in as a judgment factor, but this is a way for them to, have their voices heard, which is really important. Different supportive services, these are things that we do here at Fairhaven. First and foremost, especially when we're dealing with someone who is in the acute stages of their assault and their recovery, we want to see how they're participating in their daily life activities. Are you eating? Are you sleeping? Do you have disordered eating, disordered sleeping? Are you participating in daily life activities such as going to work, going to school, getting your kids to soccer practice, whatever that may look like? And if not, that's okay. But what are we going to do to start helping you transition back into your normal daily life activities? We're going to help them build up those coping strategies. In the beginning, when I told you guys, we're not interrupting their normal adaptive functioning. We're not going in and telling them that they can't use their number one coping skill on the worst day of their life. But now, as a supportive person, now we have to help build into their coping strategies toolbox. It is our responsibility to help them learn new, healthier coping skills so that they're not always wanting to drink. They're not always choosing pepperoni pizza. One of the first exercises I normally do with a client is I have a list of 100 coping strategies. I give them to my clients with 3 different color highlighters, and I tell them that they have to figure it out. They've got to work through all these different coping strategies. And one color highlighter means it absolutely worked. One color highlighter means, nope, that was not for me. And one color highlighter means sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Every person deals with things in different ways. I am never going to be a journaler. I have tried. I have tried bullet journals. I've tried journals that give me a prompt. I've tried free writing. I can't journal. I don't know why. It doesn't work in my brain. But so I would probably highlight the journaling of the color that means it's not working for me, but it might work for other people. Our executive director, she journals multiple times a day. That works for her, which is fantastic. But you want to help build up those coping strategies. That's a homework assignment. So you want to make sure that they're actually participating in their homework assignments. So for me, did you practice your coping strategies? Did you try to use 2 to 3 new ones this week? Are they able to appropriately express their emotions and identify if they what they are feeling is a feeling or a fact or a fear. And how are they dealing with making decisions and the aftermath of what has happened to them. You may come across somebody who, in the aftermath of their assault, has faced suicidal ideation or intent. The likelihood that someone suffers from suicide thoughts or depressive thoughts after a sexual assault is pretty high. As you can see, 2 weeks following the rape, 94% of women, I think I have this study post. Yeah, from Rain. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had my little handy dandy citation on there. 94% of women who are assaulted experience some level of post traumatic stress within the 2 weeks after their assault. Most people have some level of post traumatic stress. And 9 months after an assault, up to 30% of women will still have those symptoms. 33% of women who are raped think about suicide, and 13% of people who are raped attempt suicide. So, if you do not have a suicide protocol in place at your agency, I highly recommend you get trained, whether it be through QPR, whether it be through one of the other service providers that provide suicidal ideation training. Have some kind of protocol in place, whatever that looks like for your agency. Because if you haven't experienced somebody who is experiencing suicidal ideation or intent, I guarantee you will at some point. So make sure you have that figured out before you need it, which is really important. Here at Fairhaven, we offer a couple different types of supportive services, one of them being curriculum that's supposed to say driven, not Durban. I say this every time that I'm going to go back and fix that, and I always forget. We have curriculum driven support groups here. These are essentially like a book club. We will utilize books such as Codependent No More, Boundaries, The Courage to Heal. We have a whole lot of resources here that we use. And basically, this is a way that our survivors are able to use that curriculum. They have homework, and they're able to help facilitate some of the different thought processes after the math of their assault or their abuse, and we're able to focus on those different things. This is often going to be able to provide you with a whole lot of time for self-reflection, because a lot of the work is being done at home, and then they come in and they discuss it with the group, and this is going to help eliminate that isolation. You're going to put support systems in place by providing them with other people in their circles. We also offer open support groups. Here at Fairhaven, we use the self curriculum, which is something that I share every time. You can buy it at this website down here in the corner. It is very expensive, but it is a great curriculum to use for the most part. Some of the lessons are a little wonky, a little victim blamey sometimes. So be mindful of that. But it goes through 4 different stages after trauma, which is going over safety planning, then your emotions, your loss, and your future. But the cool thing about the self curriculum is that every lesson is individual from the other lesson. So that is why it works really great for an open support group, where you may have people who pop in here, pop in there. They come in, they get the lesson, they go home, and there's no follow up from that lesson afterwards. And then the last form of support that we offer here at Fairhaven is that individual supportive services for primary and secondary victims. You'll probably have some training throughout the week on secondary survivors and what that looks like. And so we will do individual sessions with a secondary survivor, because it's really important that everybody has their own levels of support. And so we'll meet with parents, we meet with spouses and loved ones if they are struggling with how to support their loved one through this. We also do community education and outreach. We have a prevention education team who are small but mighty. There is only 2 of them. But last year they spoke to over 15,000 students in our community about body safety and their bathing suit zones and age appropriate child sex abuse prevention education. So that's really fun. We're also out in the community providing community education to anybody who will ask us for it. And we also have the ability to do community crisis response. If there is, like, we had an individual who worked within a school system who was charged with child sex abuse material. He, during that duration of that case, we were able to offer the community some support and a safe place to come and vent and talk about their experience with that specific teacher. So that is something else that we're unique to be able to offer. With all that being said, I am officially done yapping. I have put my email here on this little slide. I will also put it in the chat box, so that if you have any questions, comments, follow-ups, you can always ask. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the chat box. If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute or throw them in the chat box. And I'm going to start answering if there's any in here. Lots of good mornings. Can we offer them a ride home if home is safe? That is an agency-based decision. So at Fairhaven, we do not put victims in our cars because we need to have a special kind of insurance to do so. We have a Lyft account, which I know is not the most victim-centered, trauma-informed way of doing it. We used to have a taxi service, and the owner of that taxi service was so amazing and so victim-centered, but he actually retired because taxis aren't a thing in, at least in Lake County anymore. We only have Lyft and Uber, so we cannot put victims in our car per safety regulations for us. But if that is something your agency is able to offer, I would definitely check with your supervisor. If you are going to put a victim in your car, especially in an acute setting, please, please, please safety plan like with your boss, share your location, do something. You do not know these people. And I want to believe that all victims are safe people, but you are dealing with somebody who just came out of a very unsafe situation. So please be safe. The only time that we ever will go to a victim's house is if we have law enforcement with us. So just be mindful of that question. If we're kicked out of the room, are we able to wait for them until the exam is done? Again, another agency-based question. I leave when the victim tells me to leave. If the service provider, if the place that I am at with that victim requests that I walk out or I leave, even though that is against the victim's rights, I do not leave. I will stand right outside the door and I remain available. It's different though if the victim is like, you know what, I've got my mom here. Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for all of your information, but I think I'm okay. And then you leave all of your resources with the victim and then you can leave at that time. But I do not leave the actual hospital or police station unless the victim themselves dismiss me. If the systems in place dismiss me, then I will let my victim know that I'll just be in the hallway waiting. What do you call the suicide training so that I can request it? Our suicide training that we provide our staff here at Fairhaven is through the Academy of Christian Counseling, but it's using the SAFE-T method, which is also used by the International Critical Incidents Trust Foundation. The SAFE-T method is just one method of assessing for suicide ideation. QPR is a pretty golden standard across most realms. QPR is offered a lot of the times by the same people in your community who offer mental health first aid. So I would definitely look into those providers. And if you have more questions about the SAFE-T method and how to get about trained by ICISF or anything like that, you can always email me. But yes, QPR is the pretty much the golden standard for suicide prevention across our state. All right. Mobile advocacy vehicles. That is my dream. So I am so jealous of you, Shannon, for having a mobile advocacy vehicle because we need one of those and we just don't have one here at Lake County because you can't use federal funds to buy a vehicle. Then there's maintenance. There's a whole lot of things that go into having a vehicle. Unfortunately, we just don't have them. So I love that for you guys down there. That is all of the questions I'm seeing in the chat box, Michael, at this time. So unless anybody else has any other questions, I am all done yapping at you guys.